You think they're pushing you away. You think their silence means you're not enough, that their distance means they don't care. But let me tell you something that will change how you see them forever. They're not avoiding you. They're avoiding pain. This isn't about you. It never was. The defenses you feel, those walls, they were built long before you ever arrived. They were built when trust broke, when safety vanished, when love meant obligation or control or betrayal. And so they survived by shrinking, by hiding, by numbing. And now you're here and you want to love them. You want in. You want the real them, not the performance, not the protector, not the mask. You want the raw, sacred, beating heart buried beneath layers of silence and self-preservation. But you can't force your way in. It's a total distortion of goodness and beauty. And love doesn't walk in with a sword, it walks in with surrender. The only way to dissolve a defense is to make it unnecessary. You don't convince them to trust you by making speeches. You don't win them over with promises. You don't lecture them on how you're different. You show them, day after day, word after word, breath after breath, you become the one place where they don't have to be strong. The one presence that doesn't demand, doesn't rush, doesn't invade. That takes power, real power. The power to hold space when they shut down. The power to stay rooted when they run. The power to not make their withdrawal about your wound. Because make no mistake, when you try to chase, when you try to fix, when you need to pull them out of the cave to make you feel better, you stop loving them and started using them. You want to unlock their sanctuary? Then stop banging on the door. Sit outside it, get quiet. Let your love become the thing that whispers through the cracks. I'm not here to rescue you. I'm here to witness you. And when the moment comes, and it will, when they peek out, when they offer some trembling piece of themselves, don't overreact. Don't make it a parade. Don't smother it. Respect it. That glimpse is sacred. It's not an invitation to conquer. It's an invitation to coexist. Listen, most people will never experience the kind of intimacy that exists on the other side of an avoidance defenses. Because most people are too impatient, too reactive, too hungry to be chosen that they miss the miracle that's unfolding. But if you have the courage to stay with it, the patience to honor the pace of a heart that's been through war, and the integrity to show up as a sanctuary, not a savior, you will see them like no one ever has. And when they finally open that door, not because you knocked it down, but because they chose to let you in, you'll realize you were never just loving a person. You were entering a temple, the temple of a soul that had learned to hide. And because you loved them wisely, they didn't just come out, they invited you in. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, becomes distant, or shuts down emotionally, the most common reaction is to take it personally. It feels like rejection. It feels like abandonment. But what most people don't realize is that this behavior is not about you, it's about them. Their defenses are not built to keep you out. They were created long before you entered the picture, designed to keep pain out. These defense mechanisms are survival strategies forged in environments where vulnerability was dangerous, where needs were unmet, or where love was inconsistent, conditional, or even weaponized. When someone grows up in that kind of environment, they learn, consciously or unconsciously, that closeness equals danger, that emotional intimacy comes at a cost, and that the safest way to protect themselves is to retreat behind emotional walls. So when an avoidant partner begins to distance themselves, what you're witnessing isn't their rejection of you, it's their muscle memory activating. It's their nervous system stepping in to protect them from a perceived threat, even if the threat is something as beautiful as connection. The irony is that what they want most, love, closeness, emotional safety, is also what they fear the most. Because in their experience, those things have come wrapped in pain. They have associated vulnerability with loss, openness with being hurt, and intimacy with engulfment or control. Understanding this is the first crack in the wall. When you stop making their defenses about your worth, your desirability, or your failure to be enough, you reclaim your own power. You stop reacting to the surface behavior and begin seeing the deeper reality. They are not attacking you, they are protecting themselves. This insight shifts your energy from frustration and hurt to compassion and wisdom. It gives you access to the truth beneath the surface, a truth that says this person has learned to survive by shutting down. And right now, they're surviving the only way they know how. This doesn't mean you tolerate emotional unavailability or abandon your own needs, but it does mean you approach the situation with a different lens. You stop trying to fix them or crack their code. You realize that healing doesn't happen by force. It happens when safety is consistent, when their system begins to recognize that you're not another source of threat, but a different kind of presence. Calm, steady, grounded. They start to soften, not because you convince them, but because their defenses are no longer necessary. So instead of reacting to their distance with anxiety or anger, you meet it with understanding. You remind yourself that their armor isn't rejection, it's a reflex. And that realization alone has the power to change the entire dynamic. Because the moment you stop seeing their withdrawal as a personal attack, you stop becoming part of the cycle they're stuck in. You become the space where something new is possible. A space where defenses can slowly dissolve, not through demand, but through trust. And that is the beginning of a connection unlike anything they've ever known. Emotional safety is not a luxury in relationships with avoidantly attached individuals. It's the absolute foundation. When someone has learned to protect their heart by pulling away, minimizing their needs, or avoiding vulnerability, they are doing so because they never felt emotionally safe when it mattered most. Their early blueprint of love often came with inconsistency, criticism, or punishment for being too needy or too exposed. So they built a system, whether consciously or not, that said, it's safer to rely on myself, it's safer to be distant than to be disappointed. What dissolves those walls isn't pleading or pursuit. It isn't grand romantic gestures or emotional ultimatums. It's safety, real, felt, grounded safety. And that safety isn't about perfection or pretending not to feel. It's about consistently showing up in a way that doesn't add to their fear. When you respond to their need for space without punishment, when you listen without trying to fix, when you allow them to be where they are without making it about you, you send a powerful message. I'm not here to control you. I'm here to see you. An avoidant person is always scanning for threat. Not physical threat, but emotional threat. Things like pressure, obligation, emotional chaos, or the fear of being swallowed by someone else's need. When your presence proves over time that you aren't a threat to their independence, when you prove that you won't invade their space or shame them for their boundaries, they begin to slowly relax their guard. That's when you start to see cracks in the armor. That's when the drawbridge lowers, not all at once, but in moments, in glimpses. What makes this so difficult is that your own needs may feel neglected. You may want more closeness, more warmth, more certainty. But if you try to get that by pulling or pressuring, you're triggering the very defense system you're hoping to dissolve. This is where emotional maturity comes in. You don't deny your needs, but you regulate your reactions. You stop trying to force connection and instead invite it through the consistency of your energy. Safety, in this context, means being able to hold space for their discomfort without personalizing it. It means not reacting when they go quiet. It means resisting the urge to interpret every withdrawal as a personal failure. It means speaking your truth clearly without needing to convince them of anything. This kind of relational safety requires strength. It requires the willingness to stay centered when someone else isn't. And as they begin to feel safe, not just logically, but in their nervous system, something extraordinary happens. They begin to come forward on their own, not because they're being pushed, but because they finally feel that the space they're stepping into won't harm them. That's the shift. That's the doorway. And it only opens in the presence of emotional safety, because it's the one thing their defenses were always trying to find, but never believed could exist. Until now, when you're in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, there will be moments where their behavior seems to make no sense. They'll pull away when things get close. They'll grow distant after a deep emotional moment. They might shut down after intimacy. And your first instinct will be to feel like something went wrong, like you broke something. But here's the truth. When an avoidant gets triggered, that is not a failure. That is not a setback. That is a portal. Triggers aren't signs that the connection is broken. Triggers are signs that you've reached a threshold, a place in them that was previously untouched. When someone is triggered, they're not being irrational. They're being wounded. Their withdrawal is a reflex, a defense against emotional pain that they may not even fully understand. It's their body remembering something they couldn't process at the time. It's their inner child panicking before their adult mind can step in. So when an avoidant partner starts to distance themselves, it's often because something touched that raw, unhealed part of them. Maybe you got too close. Maybe they felt too seen. Maybe love started to feel like dependence, and dependence started to feel like danger. And in that moment, their instinct is to escape, to create space where they can breathe, even if it costs them connection. Most people, when they feel this distance, react from fear. They chase, they demand answers, they try to fix the mood or explain away the pain, and all of that, while human, makes the situation worse. Why? Because it confirms to the avoidance nervous system that connection leads to pressure, and pressure is what they've been running from all their life. But there's another way. Instead of reacting to their trigger, you can witness it. You can meet their shutdown, not with panic, but with presence. You can sit in the discomfort without trying to solve it. That doesn't mean you suppress your emotions or pretend you're okay. It means you learn to regulate yourself first. You breathe, you ground, you remember that their trigger isn't proof of your inadequacy. It's evidence that you've touched a place inside them where love still hurts. To do this well, you need emotional endurance. You need to become someone who doesn't collapse when someone else contracts. You become the anchor, the steady heartbeat in the storm. And in doing that, you offer something few people ever do: safety in the face of chaos, trust in the middle of doubt. Over time, when an avoidant sees that their triggers don't push you away, when they learn that you don't punish their fear or abandon them when they freeze, something begins to shift. They start to believe that intimacy doesn't always lead to pain, that maybe, just maybe, connection can coexist with freedom. And in that moment, healing begins, not just for them, but for you both. Because every time you stay present through their trigger, you prove to them that love can be different. And that's the moment when their walls begin to crack, not from force, but from the power of your quiet, unwavering presence. Love doesn't need to persuade its way into someone's heart. It doesn't need to convince, to perform, or to chase approval. When you're dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies, the moment you start trying to persuade them to trust you, to open up, or to stay close, you've already stepped into the very dynamic they fear. Avoidant individuals often have a deep sensitivity to control. Even subtle emotional pressure can feel overwhelming. That's why the key isn't to talk your way into connection. It's to become the kind of presence that naturally invites it. Your presence, how you show up energetically, emotionally, and spiritually, has more impact than anything you say. If your words speak love, but your energy carries urgency, insecurity, or hidden agenda, they will feel it. People with avoidant patterns are incredibly sensitive to emotional incongruence. They've trained themselves to scan for threat, to pick up on the slightest shift in tone, mood, or intention. So when your presence says, "I need you to be different so I can feel okay," they'll retreat, no matter how loving your words sound. But if your presence says, "I am whole whether you come close or not," that is a frequency they aren't used to. That steadiness, that lack of demand, that quiet confidence that doesn't flinch when they pull away, that's the energy that begins to melt their guard. Because for once, they're not being pulled, pushed, or needed into closeness. They're being invited. And an invitation is radically different than persuasion. What's powerful about presence is that it speaks to the nervous system, not just the intellect. You can't reason someone out of fear. You can't logic your way into someone's trauma. But your presence, your calm, grounded energy can soothe what words never could. When they see that you don't fall apart when they get quiet, that you don't rush to fill the silence or prove your worth, they begin to relax, slowly, subtly, because they're feeling something that doesn't trigger their instinct to escape. You don't need to be a therapist to offer this. You don't need to have all the answers. What you need is emotional regulation and a deep respect for their pace. You need to understand that love is not about removing someone's fear. It's about refusing to become afraid in response to their fear. That is presence. That is love that doesn't wobble, that doesn't hustle, that doesn't grasp. And when you can be that kind of presence, anchored, authentic, non-reactive, you become a mirror for what they've always wanted but never trusted was real. You show them that love can be still, that closeness doesn't have to be chaos, that they don't have to perform or fix themselves to be safe with you. You become proof that love can exist without pressure. And that's when trust begins to form. Not because you convinced them, but because your presence made it undeniable. In relationships with avoidantly attached individuals, there is a delicate balance between honoring their need for space and remaining true to your own emotional reality. Many people make the mistake of thinking that in order to get close to someone avoidant, they must shrink themselves, suppress their needs, or tiptoe around the other person's boundaries. But dissolving an avoidance defenses doesn't mean abandoning yourself. It means standing fully in your truth while respecting theirs. That's what creates a real invitation, an invitation rooted in strength, not sacrifice. When someone guards their inner world tightly, it can feel like you have to earn your way in by becoming what they need. Quiet, undemanding, low minimal. But the second you start muting your authenticity to maintain connection, you've left yourself behind. And the painful truth is, the moment you stop being fully yourself, the relationship loses the potential for real intimacy. You can't create a deep bond by erasing who you are. You create it by showing up whole. Avoidant individuals often fear enmeshment. They fear being consumed, being controlled, or losing their identity and closeness, so they're hypersensitive to anything that feels like emotional pressure. But that doesn't mean they want a partner who has no needs. In fact, true connection happens when two people stand fully in who they are, without collapsing into each other. When you honor your truth, not by force, but with calm clarity, you offer something rare, connection, without demand. This means being able to say, I care about you, and I also care about me. It means being able to hold space for their need to withdraw, while not betraying your own need for closeness. You don't issue ultimatums, but you also don't tolerate emotional starvation. You communicate clearly, without drama or guilt, and you let them see who you really are, not just the version of you that keeps the peace. That takes immense emotional maturity. It requires the willingness to be misunderstood sometimes and the strength to remain loving even when you're setting a boundary. And paradoxically, this is what earns their trust. Not your compliance, not your sacrifice, your wholeness. When they see that you're not trying to rescue them or force closeness, but that you're also not abandoning your needs in the process, they begin to feel safe, not just with you, but with intimacy itself. You can't heal an avoidant by making yourself small. You can only invite them into connection by being deeply rooted in yourself. That's what creates a different kind of relationship dynamic, one where both people have room to breathe, to evolve, and to meet each other in truth rather than fear. When they feel that your connection isn't a trap, but a space where both of you get to be real, they begin to lower the drawbridge. Not because they're being pulled, but because they want to meet you there. And that meeting can only happen when both people are standing in their truth. When someone carries avoidant attachment patterns, it's easy to assume they need to be fixed, rewired, reprogrammed, corrected. But that assumption is part of the problem. At their core, avoidant individuals don't need your solutions. They don't need your lectures or strategies. What they long for, beneath all the emotional distance and self-reliance, is to be felt, to be seen without scrutiny, to be witnessed without pressure. They need someone to recognize their humanity, not just their behavior, because what looks like detachment is often just pain that has been left unattended for too long. Avoidant people have learned to rely on themselves because the people they once depended on were unavailable, critical, unpredictable, or controlling. Their independence isn't a sign of strength. It's often a wound masquerading as confidence. They don't trust easily, not because they're cold, but because trust once came with consequences. Their silence is not emptiness, it's a defense. Their withdrawal is not indifference, it's protection. And what breaks that cycle isn't intervention, it's presence. To truly reach someone avoidant, you must shift from how do I get them to open up to how can I let them feel safe enough to be themselves. That shift is everything. Because when you try to fix them, even with the best intentions, you reinforce the belief that who they are is unacceptable as is. You confirm their fear that closeness comes with conditions. But when you choose instead to feel them, to meet them without agenda, without performance, you offer them what they rarely experience: unconditional emotional resonance. Being felt is different from being analyzed. It means sitting with them in silence without needing to fill the space. It means letting their discomfort exist without trying to interrupt or interpret it. It means letting their emotions be what they are, even when they don't make sense to you. When you do this, you're not just offering support. You're becoming a mirror that reflects their value without distortion. This requires your own internal stability. You must be okay with not always getting the validation you crave. You must be willing to love without always being loved back in the way you expect. And most of all, you must stay grounded in the belief that healing happens through connection, not correction. Your job isn't to rewrite their story. It's to create a space where they can feel safe enough to rewrite it themselves. When someone feels genuinely felt, their system relaxes. The emotional armor that once served as a survival mechanism starts to soften, and they begin to believe that they no longer have to hide in order to be loved. That's where transformation happens, not in grand gestures or breakthrough conversations, but in the quiet, consistent moments where they are allowed to exist as they are, without fear of judgment or rejection. In the end, love that truly heals doesn't try to change people. It holds them so gently, so patiently, that they begin to change on their own. Not because they had to, but because they finally felt safe enough to. So if you've made it this far, know this. True connection with an avoidant partner isn't built by force, persuasion, or pressure. It's built through presence, patience, and deep personal integrity. You don't win their heart by trying to fix them. You earn their trust by seeing them fully, gently, and without judgment. And when you do, you're not just entering their life, you're entering the sacred sanctuary they never thought anyone could reach. Thank you for walking this path with courage, for choosing understanding over reaction, and for showing up with a kind of love the world desperately needs more of.